greatest kingdom ever built in Numenor, the once glorious city of Armenelos, was never meant to be found. Its ruins, a dark reminder of the price paid for its arrogance. The grand city of Armenelos, once the beating heart of Numenor, was a marvel of engineering, culture, and wealth. Its towering spires, gilded walls, and radiant gardens stood as a testament to the power and prosperity of the Numenorians, a people gifted with unmatched wisdom and strength. Yet in a single cataclysmic moment, it was swallowed by the sea. The entire city sank beneath the waves, leaving no trace behind, its riches and treasures lost forever to the depths. Or so the stories say. But what if this was not the end of the city's story? What if the fall of Armenelos was not just an accident of fate, but a dark consequence of actions long forbidden? What if, in their pride, the Numenorians had unearthed forces they were never meant to find, ancient and malevolent powers that should have remained hidden forever? Could the city's ruin be more than just a tragic end? Could it be a warning, one that Middle-earth has failed to heed? Beneath the waves, there may still be remnants of Armenelos, hidden truths, cursed knowledge, and forces that the Valor themselves sought to keep buried. And somewhere in the forgotten corners of the world, the memory of what happened in Armenelos lives on, still casting a shadow over Middle-earth. The mystery of Armenelos beckons, a tale of lost history, of hubris and greed, and of powers that should never have been touched. Its ruins may yet be waiting to reveal their secrets, but the question remains, what will happen to those who seek the truth? And more importantly, what darkness still lies buried beneath the surface, waiting to rise once more? Gandalf had long been fascinated by the tales of Numenor, but it was the fall of Armenelos that had always haunted him. He had heard the stories, of course, the great city, built upon the might of Numenor's greatest kings, and its sudden, mysterious demise. According to the histories, the city was swallowed by the sea, and with it, the entire kingdom of Numenor. But even as he pored over these ancient records, Gandalf had always felt a lingering sense of doubt. The history of Armenelos, like many ancient tales, was fragmented, full of gaps and contradictions. The destruction of the city was too sudden, too complete, for it to be the result of mere natural disaster. Gandalf had traveled widely, seeking out forgotten texts and forgotten voices that might hold the key to the mystery. In his journeys, he had consulted with elven scholars, dwarves, and even humans who still carried the memory of Numenor's greatness. Each of them spoke in awe of the city's beauty and power, but none could provide a satisfactory explanation for its downfall. Some claimed it was divine punishment, a judgment from the Valor, for Numenor's pride and ambition. But that explanation, Gandalf knew, was too simple, too clean. He was certain there was more to the story. The Numenorians had been a proud people, but they were not foolish. They had built their great city on the belief that they could harness knowledge and power that no mortal had ever dreamed of. But what if they had unearthed something they were never meant to discover? What if their pride had drawn them into the very heart of darkness itself? Gandalf had heard whispers of strange occurrences, dark forces that had begun to stir in the final days of the kingdom. Ar-Pharazôn, the last king of Numenor, had been obsessed with immortality, seeking to conquer death itself. He had turned to forbidden knowledge, consulting Sauron and possibly other dark powers. But was Sauron the true architect of the kingdom's destruction? Or was there a deeper, older evil that had been awakened beneath the streets of Armenelos? The more Gandalf uncovered, the more he became convinced that the fall of Armenelos was not merely the result of defying the Valor. There were hints of something far older, a dark shadow from the First Age that had never truly been vanquished. Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, had been defeated in the distant past, but his evil had never been completely eradicated. Could the Númenóreans' desire for immortality have led them to tap into Morgoth's lingering power? Could the city have been built upon ancient secrets that the Valor had feared to reveal? Gandalf knew that his journey into the mystery of Armenelos would not be easy. It would require him to delve into the deepest corners of Númenórean history, and perhaps even face dangers that had been long forgotten. But there was no turning back. The knowledge he sought was too important, and the risk of leaving it unexamined too great. His first step was to seek out those who might still possess knowledge of the lost kingdom. In Rivendell, he consulted Elrond, who had long been a keeper of ancient lore. Together, they pored over the old texts, trying to make sense of the fragmented history of Númenor. But the answers were elusive. There were stories of the city's grandeur, of its mighty kings, but little that spoke of its downfall. Aragorn, too, joined in the search. As the heir of Gondor, he had long been aware of Númenor's legacy, but he had never known the full extent of the kingdom's dark history. Gandalf and Aragorn discussed the ancient texts, noting the strange inconsistencies and gaps. It was clear that the full story had been deliberately obscured. But why? What had the Númenóreans discovered in the depths of their city that had caused the Valor to hide the truth from the world? The more they delved into the past, the more Gandalf began to suspect that the Númenóreans had not only defied the Valor's will, but had also uncovered forbidden knowledge that could have unleashed a power beyond their control. Perhaps the fall of Armenelos was not simply divine punishment. It was the result of a dangerous and unholy pact, one that the kings of Númenor had made with forces they could not understand. The investigation continued for days, with Gandalf, Aragorn, and Elrond piecing together the fragmented accounts of the fall of the great city. Clues began to emerge, suggesting that the final king of Númenor, Ar-Pharazôn, had sought something far more than immortality. He had sought to harness the power of Morgoth's magic, a power that had been buried beneath the city streets for centuries. The very foundation of Armenelos, it seemed, had been built upon forbidden magic, and that magic had been awakened by the kingdom's pride. But what had been uncovered in the depths of Armenelos, and what consequences had it unleashed upon the world? The answers were tantalizingly close, but Gandalf knew that the full truth might never be fully revealed, at least not without great peril. Yet even as the mystery deepened, one thing became clear. The fall of Armenelos was not just the end of a kingdom. It was a warning, a reminder that some forces are better left undisturbed. Gandalf's mind raced as he sat alone in the quiet chambers of Rivendell, the flickering light of a single candle casting long shadows across the room. The ancient scrolls and texts before him were as worn as they were heavy with history. He had studied the Númenórean ruins before, but this time was different. The mystery of Armenelos, the greatest of all Númenórean cities, had always haunted him, but now it gnawed at him with greater intensity. What had really happened to this city, the heart of Númenor? And why did he feel this growing suspicion that its fall had not been as natural as the histories suggested? The more Gandalf read, the more troubling the accounts became. In every text, every whisper from survivors and ancient historians, a disturbing pattern began to form. Unnatural storms, strange disappearances, and whispers of ancient rituals all pointed to one thing. The Númenóreans had tampered with forces they were never meant to control. And the consequences of their arrogance, it seemed, were far worse than any of the surviving accounts had indicated. One story, passed down through generations, stood out in particular. It spoke of rituals, dark and secret, conducted in the final days of the kingdom, driven by the desperate desire for immortality. Ar-Pharazôn, the last king of Númenor, had been obsessed with defying death, seeking power beyond mortal comprehension. And in his search, he had stumbled upon something far darker than he ever could have imagined. The Palantiri, those mystical seeing stones, tools of communication and power, had become central to his quest. Gandalf had always known that the Palantiri were powerful, dangerous even. But now he began to suspect their role in the fall of Armenelos was far more profound than mere use as tools for communication. These stones, capable of viewing distant lands and futures, could also serve to peer into forbidden knowledge. And this knowledge, once glimpsed, could drive even the wisest to madness. The deeper they gazed, the more they became ensnared by forces they could never hope to understand. Ar-Pharazôn had sought immortality, but he had found only despair. As Gandalf reflected on the ancient texts, an unsettling thought crept into his mind. The Númenóreans, like many before them, had been consumed by their pride. But was it their own ambition that destroyed them, Or had they awakened a darker force, one that had been buried since the earliest days of Middle-earth? He could not ignore the growing suspicion that the destruction of Armenelos was not just the result of the arrogance of a few kings, but a result of a deeper, darker magic, a magic that might still linger beneath the waves, waiting to rise again. The thought of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, whose shadow had stretched over the world long before Sauron's rise, loomed over his musings. Morgoth's fortress, Utumno, had been the birthplace of many of the dark forces that had shaped Middle-earth. But what if some of that power had never been truly destroyed? What if the Númenóreans had unwittingly unleashed remnants of Morgoth's corruption when they sought to uncover the secrets of immortality? Gandalf's mind flashed to the Balrog of Moria, awakened by the greed and pride of the dwarves. The same kind of ambition had driven the Númenóreans to their doom. In both cases, unchecked pride and the thirst for power had awakened ancient evils that should have remained buried. Was Morgoth's shadow still haunting the ruins of Armenelos, waiting for those brave or foolish enough to seek it? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was Aragorn, the heir of Gondor, whose connection to Númenor and its past had always been a point of personal interest to Gandalf. Aragorn entered, his face etched with the same deep concerns. "I've been following your research, Gandalf," Aragorn said quietly. "What have you found?" Gandalf looked at Aragorn, his eyes grim. "The fall of Armenelos is not what the histories have told us. It was not simply the result of divine retribution for the pride of Númenor. There is something darker at play here, something tied to Morgoth, something that even the Valar feared to speak of." Aragorn's expression darkened. "And you believe this darkness is still alive?" "I do," Gandalf replied. "I believe the Númenóreans' search for immortality led them to uncover forces that should never have been unearthed. The Palantiri, those seeing stones, played a crucial role in their downfall. They were used not just for communication, but to peer into realms of forbidden knowledge. What Ar-Pharazôn glimpsed through the stones may have unleashed a force even the Valar could not contain." Frodo, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "So what's left? If the city fell beneath the sea, buried under the waves, what more can we discover? And why should we seek it out?" Gandalf's gaze turned to Frodo, the ring-bearer whose courage had proven invaluable time and again. "Because," Gandalf began, his voice grave, "the truth of Armenelos may still shape the future of Middle-earth. If Morgoth's influence is indeed still present, we cannot allow it to rise again. We must find the ruins and uncover the truth of what happened. Only then can we understand the extent of the evil we face." With their mission clear, Gandalf, Aragorn, and Frodo began preparations for their journey to the lost city of Armenelos, which lay submerged beneath the sea. The task ahead would not be easy, but it was one they could not ignore. The dark whispers of the past had come to life once more, and it was up to them to confront the ancient evil that still lingered beneath the waves. Aragorn's lineage, tied to the Númenórean kings, gave him a unique connection to this mission. His bloodline, a reminder of the grandeur of the past, also carried the weight of its fall. As the group gathered supplies and made plans, the tension in the air was palpable. This was no ordinary exploration. What they sought was a dark truth that had been buried for centuries. What they hoped to uncover could change the fate of Middle-earth forever. The danger of the journey was not just in what they might find, but in what they might unleash. The ancient powers that had destroyed Armenelos had been long dormant, but they had never truly been gone. Now they were stirring once more, beckoning those who dared to seek them. As Gandalf prepared for the journey, a sense of dread settled over him. He had no illusions about the dangers ahead, and yet the weight of responsibility pressed upon him. The darkness they were about to uncover could very well be beyond their control. But the need to know, to understand what had happened in Armenelos, to uncover the secrets of a kingdom lost to time, was too great to ignore. With one final glance at the maps and scrolls before him, Gandalf turned to his companions. "We must go," he said. "The secrets of Armenelos are waiting to be found, but we must tread carefully, for what lies beneath may prove to be more than we are prepared for." As they set out for the lost city, the shadows of the past loomed large. The fate of Armenelos was intertwined with the fate of all Middle-earth, and what they discovered would shape the future of the free peoples, for good or ill. As Gandalf stood before the half-submerged ruins of Armenelos, a heavy silence hung in the air. The city, once a marvel of Númenórean might, lay buried in the ocean's depths, its towering spires and golden walls now nothing more than shadows of the past. Yet, despite its fall, something about the city's destruction felt incomplete, unfinished, as if the darkness that had consumed it still lingered, just beneath the surface. In his hand, Gandalf held the remnants of a broken palantir, its glassy surface cracked, but still faintly glowing. This stone, one of the many scattered across Middle-earth, had once belonged to the kings of Númenor, a tool for communication, a vessel for forbidden knowledge. But as Gandalf stared into its depths, a dark truth began to unfurl before him, one that chilled him to his core. The Númenóreans had uncovered something they were never meant to find. They had sought immortality, the dream of kings and mortals alike. But what they discovered was not the gift of eternal life, but a curse, a terrible power that had been left dormant by the Valor, a force that should have never been awakened. Through the Palantiri, they had tapped into Morgoth's corrupted magic, forever altering the course of their fate. Gandalf's thoughts raced back to the ancient records he had uncovered, the whispers of the past that had led him here. The Númenóreans had built Armenelos their arrogance and their ambition, had believed they could wield this power, control it for their own ends. But in the end, it was the power that controlled them. The city of Armenelos had been the perfect vessel for Morgoth's corruption. Its rulers, blinded by their desire for immortality, had built their kingdom upon the ashes of the first Dark Lord's influence, and in doing so, had invited a far greater darkness into their world. What had begun as a kingdom of glory had quickly become a kingdom of despair. As Gandalf looked over the remains of the city, the weight of the revelation struck him. This was no mere fall from grace. This was the unfolding of a terrible prophecy, one that had been sealed away for centuries. The Palantiri had not only allowed the Númenóreans to glimpse the future, they had also shown them the terrible truth about their own downfall. They had revealed the darkest parts of their souls, twisted their vision of the world, and driven them into madness. The deeper Gandalf looked into the history of Armenelos, the more certain he became. The Númenóreans had never been meant to find this knowledge. The curse of Morgoth had been placed upon them long before their fall. Even as they drowned beneath the sea, their legacy, this darkness, had not been fully eradicated. It had merely been sealed away, waiting for the right moment to resurface. As the truth of this revelation washed over Gandalf, a sense of escalating danger filled the air. The city, though sunken beneath the waves, had not been fully consumed by the sea. Its corrupted magic still lingered, its power far from extinguished. The very stones that had once been used by the kings of Númenor now acted as vessels for Morgoth's will. And as Gandalf studied the Palantir in his hand, he could feel its ancient influence stirring within him. His vision blurred as he gazed deeper into the stone's dark depths. A vision began to unfold before him. The world consumed in flame, the remnants of Númenor's hubris setting the world ablaze. Gandalf staggered back, his heart racing. The danger was no longer just a relic of the past. It was a present threat, a force that could rise again and wreak untold havoc upon Middle-earth. The very magic the Númenóreans had used to communicate across vast distances now acted as a conduit for Morgoth's lingering darkness. And even though the city had been lost, the power it contained was still very much alive. The more Gandalf delved into the remnants of Armenelos, the clearer it became. Morgoth's shadow had never truly faded from Middle-earth. His legacy, his power, had been imprinted upon the very foundations of the city, and the Númenóreans had unknowingly allowed that evil to take root once again. As Gandalf came to this realization, a deep sense of foreboding washed over him. Sauron, though a powerful Dark Lord in his own right, had only been the tool of an even greater force. Morgoth, whose influence had been thought destroyed, had instead found another way to manifest. And it had been through the Númenóreans' greed and ambition that his power had been reignited. the last king of Numenor, Arpharazin, had thought to defy death, to control Morgoth's power. But in the end, it was that very power that had destroyed him. And as Gandalf stared into the depths of the Palantir, he understood the terrible truth. The Númenóreans had not merely sought immortality. They had unknowingly sought to bring Morgoth back, to release his corruption back into the world. And they had failed. The very stones of Armenelos, which had once served as tools of wisdom and power, were now the conduits of Morgoth's will, spreading his evil across the land. What the Númenóreans had intended as a gift had turned into a curse. And now, the darkness that had been locked away for so long was beginning to stir once again. As Gandalf stumbled back from the stone, the implications of his discovery began to settle heavily upon him. This was not just the unveiling of history. This was the unveiling of a terrible power, one that had the potential to reshape the future of Middle-earth. The fall of Armenelos had been the beginning, but the evil it had unleashed could continue to haunt Middle-earth for centuries to come. The danger was real, and Gandalf knew that the only way to stop it was to destroy the remnants of Morgoth's influence. But that, too, would not be easy. The Palantiri, the very vessels of this dark power, had to be destroyed, and the truth of Armenelos, its forbidden knowledge, had to remain buried forever. As Gandalf turned to Aragorn and Frodo, his face grim with the weight of what they had discovered, he understood the stakes. The legacy of Morgoth's darkness was not something that could be easily erased. It was a shadow that had been cast upon Middle-earth long ago, and it would take great courage and sacrifice to remove it. But he also knew one thing for certain. If they did not act now, the evil of Armenelos would rise once again, bringing with it the same destruction it had once wrought. They had uncovered the dark truth, and now they had to make a choice: to confront the darkness or to allow it to consume them all. Aftermath, revelation of the true depth. The journey had forever changed Gandalf and his companions. They had ventured deep into the heart of Númenor's lost history, uncovering secrets that had been hidden for millennia. What they had discovered was more terrible than they could have imagined. The dark legacy of Morgoth, still tainting the world, still threatening to rise again. But the journey had also shown them the cost of seeking knowledge, how even the noblest of kings, the wisest of rulers, could become ensnared by the allure of power and immortality. The Númenóreans had been driven by the desire to conquer death, but in the end, they had only unleashed a curse that would haunt Middle-earth for ages to come. As Gandalf returned to the west, the weight of their discovery hung heavily upon him. He now knew that evil was never truly destroyed. It could only be hidden, sealed away, or forgotten. But it would always remain, waiting for the moment when it could return. Some secrets, Gandalf whispered, were meant to remain buried forever. For the truth is often darker than anyone can imagine. And with that, the legacy of Morgoth's power continue to linger, a reminder that even the greatest of kings, in their pursuit of knowledge and immortality, could unknowingly awaken forces that should have been left undisturbed. The story of Armenelos was a warning, and the consequences of its uncovering had only just begun.